Hello, so mind maps are a really good way of consolidating your work after the review and consolidation. They pull everything together, they let you see the links within the topic, and they help you see the bigger picture of the topic as a whole. Not only at the end of the review and consolidation is this a good idea, but also if you're going back to review a topic that you haven't done in a while. So for second years, if you're reviewing an A1 topic, doing a mind map of it is really good at pulling everything out. It'll also help you spot the gaps where your knowledge is. So a really important thing when you're doing mind maps is getting your setup right. So the setup is as follows. You need to have the syllabus aims for the topic you're doing. Now the one I'm going to do today is ionization energy. So I've just printed off the syllabus aims for ionization energy, which are at the bottom of the independent study. If you've not got a printer, pull it up on your computer. You're going to need the textbook, and hopefully it goes without saying, turn that to the correct page. So ionization energies, and your notes from lesson. Here's my lovely notes from my lesson on ionization energies. So that's your setup. And then what you're going to do is get an A3 piece of paper. I would use A3, A4 will not be big enough. If you want to nick some A3 paper from us, we'll be more than happy to give you some free of charge. Just ask your teacher in lesson or at the end of a lesson and they'll give you a couple of sheets. And then you're going to go through the syllabus aims. This is what you're going to use as your main guide to make sure you've not missed anything out. The textbook is where you're probably going to get most of the information from, and you're going to supplement that with your notes, which will or should definitely include extra things that will not be in the textbook. Extra tips, extra diagrams, extra ways of doing things, and also just things written in your own words, which is far better for you in terms of understanding. So, Blue Peter style, here's what I made earlier. Big reveal, ta-da! And you'll see straight off the bat, I've probably squeezed a little too much on this page. If you've got big handwriting or you're doing a topic which has lots of big diagrams, there's absolutely nothing wrong with turning over and carrying on your mind map on the back. And it can just be a double-sided mind map. Nothing wrong with that. What you don't want to do is just try and squeeze it all on one side and do dead diddy writing and everything has to go sideways and it becomes hard to read properly. And that's going to interfere with you using it and memorizing it. You'll also notice I've used a little bit of red. And that's fine. Adding a little bit of colour to maybe highlight key words or just to break it up a little bit is a good thing. But there's definitely a limit. You don't want to go over the top, right? If you're using 6 or 7 different colours and glitter pens and stars and all of this, it's going to be too much. You're not going to be able to focus on what you need to focus on. So 2 or 3 colours max is the optimum amount to use. How did I make this mind map then? So I've got my independent study checklist from the bottom of the independent study, and literally just one at a time I went through these bullet points. So periodic trend in electronic configuration and classification of SP and D. Well, you can see that's this little bit over here. That's quite a short bit of work. And you'll notice I've included a little diagram of the periodic table. In general, diagrams and pictures and graphs are really, really useful because humans are better at remembering pictures and diagrams better than they are big clunky sentences, especially if you're a visual learner. So as much as possible, if you can draw something as a diagram or a graph or whatever, get a little example of that down there, and in terms of your long-term memory, that'll really, really help. It'll also save you time when you're trying to memorize it, which I'm sure we'd all appreciate. So that's my first bullet point there. Next, I'm just moving down. Define the first ionization energy. Well, if I go to my textbook, there we go, first ionization energy, it says it right there. So I'm just reading through my book until I find the relevant information. Let's check my notes. Was there anything else on that? No, nothing else on that in my notes, but worth checking. And you'll notice in my mind map, I've just put a little example equation just there. So that's also very useful. Often in chemistry, as I'm sure you've realised by now, you'll be asked to write something as an equation in the question. So it's useful to get that down if you can as an equation, so you can then see how to convert that sentence into an equation. And then I'm just going to go down. So we also need to understand the term successive ionisation energy. So I've got a little bit on that there here. Again, you can see I've done a graph. Now, where did I get that graph from? Well, I just nicked it out of the textbook. I used their example. And of course, as I was writing it down, I made sure I understood it. So graphs, pictures, diagrams, examples, all really useful. Now, as a student, when I'm in lesson, one thing my teacher always has to correct me on personally is that when I'm doing successive ionisation energies, I always make a mistake and I always try and remove more than one electron. So when I'm looking at the feedback from my review and consolidation, I've noticed my teacher always says, remember to only remove one electron at a time. So although it doesn't say this in the textbook, although it doesn't say this in my notes, I've just added on a little reminder to myself, just remember, only remove one electron at a time. And that's a really good idea too, because if that's something I keep on making a mistake on, by putting a little note about it, and remembering the note, I'm less likely to make that again. So don't be afraid to add on little personal tips for yourself based on the mistakes you personally tend to make. It's never a problem to make a mistake. In fact, sometimes it's a good thing because it helps you realise where you've gone wrong, as long as you do something about it, right? I've also, again, you can see I've put a little bit about finding the identity from successive ionisation energies, a little bit of colour, and an example. Now, where did I get that example from? From the textbook. You will also definitely have had an example of that in your notes, so you could have used an example from your notes as well. Moving on then, again, I'm just using this as my guide. I'm going through it one bullet point at a time. Now, these bits in italics, these are the bits I'm going to be really careful with, because these are the slightly trickier bits, which require a bit of a deeper understanding. So I'm really going to do these carefully. Explain the trend in first ionisation across a period and down a group. So again, I'm going to get my textbook out. I've got a little bit there. Okay, that's not relevant. Here we go. Trend down a group. Trend across a period. So I'm pulling all the information out of the textbook, and I'm going to look through my notes to see if there's any supplementary information. So here we go. Trend across a period, trend down a group. And in my notes, I noticed my teacher had made a really big deal about these two exceptions. So I've made sure to get these two exceptions down and put them in a big box to make it stand out. Because in my lesson, my teacher said, put it in a box, make it stand out, because these are the bits everyone always forgets. So I'm using my textbook and my notes together. And again, you'll notice I've included just a few little dot and cross diagrams or cross diagrams of the first three elements across a period and the first three elements down a group. Just so when I'm reading these sentences, I can picture those trends in my head visually. Being able to picture it in your head visually is really important. And that's it. So I've got my mind map. All I need to do now is boot camp this. So that's just using the look, cover, write, check, repeat, repeat, repeat. So I'm going to try and get this in my head. I might try and do half at a time to begin with, so maybe I'll just do this half to begin with. Eventually, I'm going to try and have the whole thing in my head, cover it up, try and copy it down from, well, not copy, try and write it down from memory, reveal your original, and check to see if you've made any mistakes. If you have made a mistake, brilliant. You now know that's a bit you need to focus on. Thank you.